Here in South Africa, becoming wealthy and rich seems like one of the most attractive accomplishments. Our country does have some of the most beautiful women after all, the most beautiful and affordable mansions in places like Constantia and Stain City. People worship at your feet when you amass that kind of wealth that we're talking about, when we're talking about millions of dollars, or even just merely a few millions of rands. But there is one thing lingering in my mind that makes me afraid of becoming wealthy. It makes me actually dread the idea of becoming rich in this country. The vastly popular hitman culture.
Last words uttered by Keenan Forbes, known professionally as AKA. The 35-year-old rapper was gunned down outside a restaurant on Florida Road in Durban last night.
When you become wealthy here in South Africa, it has become easy for someone to assassinate you.
When news of Chris Hani's death broke, chaos erupted.
You live knowing that your enemy or someone jealous of you can someday wake up and just pay someone 200,000 rand to actually take you out or end your life right there and then.
Thank you for having us. When we arrived here last night, we found two lifeless bodies of a 35-year-old prominent musician.
Last time I drove into the highway on my way somewhere, I literally saw a car that had been just bathed in a lot of bullet holes. Clearly signs of another hit. These things are so traumatic that I honestly believe places like Stain City are becoming the only safe havens if you become rich and want to protect your life from jealous and angry people. We now live in a country where I am terrified by the idea of driving a car like a Ford Ranger because these criminals truly love hijacking and stealing cars.
Holy fucking shit.
Bodies of 18 suspected cash and transit robbers from a crime scene in Limpopo. The 16 men and 2 women were killed in a shootout between the police and suspected robbers at a house in Louis Trichardt. This happened yesterday. Now, police believe that 18 are linked to the 11 cash heists in the province since the beginning of the year.
Our country has one of the biggest rates of organized crime in the world right now because everyone has become so desperate for money to a point that they'll do anything to get their hands on it. I will name a few things off the top of my head that I feel have damaged our society to such an extent that organized crime flourishes.
Angise connection wonke umuntu udlala department yakhe ukuthi okay mina nje eyami department ile mina abe ngigodi with communication.
First and foremost, our biggest problem right now is the government itself. We lack strong leadership. Actually, our leadership is gag, honestly. Have you heard the saying that when a parent loves to swear at home, the child will most likely catch the habit? Well, that's exactly what is happening to South Africa. The top leadership that is meant to guide and organize us is full of crooks and selfish people. So this bad habit has gone down to our law enforcement and most of the people in our legal system. The police literally usually take bribes for anything and everything. You get stopped at a traffic light, pay 200 rand, and they will let it slide. I honestly love and appreciate that system, and I prefer it over the American police brutality, but the problem will start when the police work together with the hitmen and the drug dealers to help these smuggling rings flourish. What if you reach a point where even human trafficking flourishes through bribery of the police? There's a video I once saw where this other hitman was explaining how they get their weapons for all these contracts. He said that they literally pay the police to give them these firearms that can't be linked back to the crime scene after investigations. Some truly frightening things, honestly. You live life afraid because the people who are meant to protect you are the very same people who will actually sell your life. Because of how sensitive this topic is, I won't name some names. There's this other notorious taxi owner who allegedly assassinated this other wealthy businessman out of pure jealousy because this businessman was known for having a lot of government tenders. Just imagine paying 100,000 rand to end someone's life. It's actually a low-key famous case here in South Africa. But I won't name any names because I also value my life. These high-profile hitman cases are very common now, especially here in SA. Politicians are taken out, wealthy businessmen are taken out, and even celebrities are no longer safe from these organized hits. Was Senzo Meyiwa's ending also another transaction in the business of organized crime? AKA's case was clearly a case of assassination. That one was way too obvious. We could all tell from the very first footage. The ending of AKA really hit deep with me personally because I liked the guy's music and his personality. But it's truly sad that at such a young age his life was taken away from us. Another very famous and sad case is the death of Chris Hani. As you should all know by now, Chris Hani was the leader of ANC's armed wing Umkhonto weSizwe as we moved closer to the liberation from the apartheid regime. Chris Hani was very influential. I believe Chris Hani was the only one who challenged Nelson Mandela in terms of influence at that point in time. And there was probably a lot of very powerful people who did not like the idea of a South Africa led by Chris Hani. Many wanted Mandela to lead the country because Nelson Mandela was using a gentle approach and he was offering a smooth transition to a government that wouldn't take wealth from the wealthy 1% of the nation. The wealthy 1% during the apartheid regime didn't want the National Party losing power because they feared losing their wealth, land and resources they had looted from the nation. So if Nelson Mandela came to power, they can just create BEE and share less than 10% of their wealth while amassing more wealth when the European nations opened trade with South Africa because of the illusion of democracy. So as you can tell by now, Chris Hani was an uncertainty. Uncertainty is a threat to the powerful. So they put a hit on him and assassinated. Guess what? We'll never know who actually put the hit on Chris Hani. Here recently we have AKA. After all the drama with his ex-fiancée Nelly Tembe, things went quiet. Then he started posting videos and pictures of himself moving on with his life, posting Nadia Nakai and showing signs that he was looking to marry her soon. Then guess what happened? Boom, he was assassinated in front of the public eye. And I can guarantee you that they wouldn't find out who actually sent out the hit or who actually paid the money. If you will just prosecute the hitman, he will gladly go to jail. Why not do some old school interrogation, like one nail at a time, then move to his toes until he tells you who actually paid him? These kinds of incidents make you wonder what exactly happened to Lucky Dube that day in Rosettenville.
Angithi ngiyasazi isibongo sakho sengiyohlala phansi angithi uneyidalo ngiyokhuluma neyidalwa zakho ngikhanyisele mina khona lento ukuthi ukhanyise ngihambe ngiye emanzini noma ezibeni ngiyofaka imali ngikuthengeke manje ngithi nansi ingane ayidubuleki iqeda abantu kodwa iyabasichukuluza abantu ngiyacela madoda nimphumuze ningivumele ukuthi ngisuse lo muntu.
This other hitman once said before he comes to end your life, he first goes to pray and ask your ancestors for permission to kill you. Yes, you just heard that right. He first goes to pray and ask your ancestors for permission to come and kill you. Like, isn't that something else? Even your ancestors are so jealous of you and all their achievements because your achievements are far greater than them at that point in time. So they actually allow the hitman to come and kill you. So they actually are complicit in the crime. This is why it's very important to question every faith or belief system thoroughly. Why do people go to the distance of killing another person? Taking someone out has always been the easiest way to get your hands on their wealth and their estate. Even celebrities, especially musicians, have fallen victims to these disgusting tactics due to their success. The price for being the very best in life in your society is very high. It's usually your life. Look at what happened to Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson climbed to the top of the music industry and his Mijak catalog became one of the most valuable catalogs in music entertainment history. But that's not all. No. Most of you don't know how much power Michael Jackson actually held and why they literally looked to take him out. Let me briefly explain.
All alone, I sit home by the phone, waiting for you.
You were the guy who said to Michael Jackson, you should get into publishing.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Do you love the irony?
And he bought all your songs.
Associated Television, or ATV, was a British television broadcasting company founded in 1955 by Louis Grade. Over the next 2 decades, ATV expanded through acquisitions to become an entertainment conglomerate with business lines from the recording industry, music industry, and film industry. ATV acquired Northern Songs, a publisher of Lennon-McCartney songs or the Lennon-McCartney catalog, For those who don't know, Lennon-McCartney is the abbreviation of the partnership between Paul McCartney and John Lennon in their songwriting. The catalogue featured almost every song written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Northern Songs was co-owned by Lennon, McCartney, Brian Epstein, and Dick James, who owned a controlling interest. In 1969, James offered to sell his shares of ATV. Lennon and McCartney then attempted to gain a controlling interest in the company. In 1981, American singer Michael Jackson recorded a few songs with Paul McCartney. During these sessions, Michael Jackson stayed at the home of Paul and Linda McCartney, becoming very friendly with both of them during his time. One evening while at the dining table, Paul McCartney brought out a thick-bound notebook displaying all the songs to which he owned publishing rights to. Michael Jackson grew more excited as he examined the pages. He inquired about how to buy the songs and how the songs were used. McCartney explained that music publishing was a very lucrative part of the music business. Michael Jackson replied by telling Paul McCartney that he would buy the Beatles songs one day. McCartney laughed, saying, "Good. Great joke." I actually saw this video once whilst watching an interview between Paul McCartney and this other radio show host in America. Michael Jackson was first informed that the ATV catalogue was up for sale in September 1984 by his attorney John Branca, who had put together Michael Jackson's earlier catalogue acquisitions. Warned of the competition he would face in buying such popular music songs, Michael Jackson remained resolute in his decision to purchase them. According to Bert Reuter, he negotiated the sale of ATV music for Holmes Accord, but Paul didn't want it at that time. Lennon's widow Yoko Ono had been contacted as well, but also did not want to bid either. Holmes Accord contacted Michael Jackson and talks resumed. Jackson only raised his bid to $47.5 million, which was actually a lot in 1984, but he had the advantage of being able to close the deal faster. Having completed due diligence of ATV music prior to any formal agreement, he also agreed to visit Australia as a guest of Holmes Accord and to appear on the Channel 7 Perth telethon. Holmes Accord included some more assets and agreed to an established scholarship in Michael Jackson's name at the US University. Branca closed the deal and purchased ATV music on Michael Jackson's behalf for $47.5 million on August 10, 1985. On October 1985, Michael Jackson fulfilled his contract of the provision to visit Perth, Western Australia and to appear on the telethon, where he spoke briefly and met 2 children. Michael Jackson owned 2 of the most valuable music catalogs of all time, and even music by artists like Eminem as well. This is how much power he actually held. Billions of dollars, and I mean billions of dollars. So what actually happened is people decided to take him out, using his doctor as the hitman. Few years after his passing, guess what actually happened? In September 2016, Sony acquired the Jackson estate stake in Sony ATV in a deal worth around $750 million. But that's not all they actually paid for this catalog. They paid roughly somewhere above $1 billion. That's how they actually ended up paying to purchase the Sony ATV catalog from Michael Jackson after he actually passed away. Imagine how much money they would have paid whilst he was still alive. The Jackson estate actually retained ownership of the MEGACY catalog, which holds rights to Michael Jackson's songs and his master recordings. The revenue is actually being placed in the trust for Michael Jackson's children, so ideally, my friends, success puts a target on your back. But luckily, Michael Jackson was smart enough to secure his assets. This culture of Inkabi is not only driven by problems in the government, but there are quite a number of issues in society as well. People lack a good conscience. You can't just wake up some day and decide it's best to end someone else's life. I know I can never relate to these people because they are driven and motivated by different circumstances in life and different desires. But I believe going to the extent of actually killing someone is quite extreme. Some of these people are trying to provide for their families, so they go ahead and execute the hit without any guilt. But what actually happens is you leave a child fatherless, and you leave some families also spiraling into poverty and destruction. You provide for your family temporarily and end up either getting arrested or you end up getting killed yourself. So at the end of the day, instead of one family being damaged, which is your family of course, you've also caused many other families to be damaged or to fall into a state of despair. I really don't think there are many ways to solve these kind of problems in society, except for creating a death sentence of course, or torturing individuals until they actually reveal their clients. The biggest solution is fixing our government first by putting an end to the looting and holding all the ministers and former ministers accountable for the money they have stolen.